More countries are mobilising disaster relief assistance for Syria and Turkey, answering the call of two nations in mourning.
An outpouring of international support, in empathy and in aid. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says at least 45 countries have offered their help. From all corners of the world, governments making clear all hands will be on deck in rescue and recovery efforts.
下阶段，中方还将根据两国的需求，继续提供支持和帮助。
The Australian government will provide an initial $10 million in humanitarian assistance to those affected.
New Zealand will also be contributing to the international effort.
Rescue workers from some countries like Italy and Russia have already touched down in Turkey. They join a race against time to find remaining survivors. But a feat of monumental proportions awaits them, with freezing temperatures and unforgiving snowstorms complicating ongoing efforts. Many on the ground clinging to hopes that those challenges can be surmounted by international rescue personnel. Teams from the US and China, packed with rescue specialists, doctors, equipment and dogs, are en route, with years of experience in finding survivors. But coordinating the many organizations that have joined and will join the effort is a huge task for the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. All this while keeping the needs of the Turkish people foremost priorities.
Şu gördüğünüz arkamdaki enkazda 2 tane yeğenim var. Dün saat 2 sıralarında şu bina çöktü. Bunun gibi belki yüzlerce bina daha çökmüş. Ve binlerce insan var şu anda bu enkazların altında. Ne bırakıyorlar kendimiz müdahale edelim, ne kendileri bir eleman gönderiyorlar.
Equally distressing scenes across the border in Syria, where harsh weather is far from the only problem. More than 11 years of war, all but decimating the country's funds for a rainy day, not to mention critical infrastructure. Urgent humanitarian aid already on its way. These batches from neighbouring Iraq and Iran said to contain medicines, tents and food. But with roads suffering damage beyond recognition, the physical distribution of aid to those who need it most is among most pressing problems.
The World Health Organization says that up to 23 million people in Turkey and Syria could be affected by the quakes. Ollie Barrett joins us live now from London for more on this. So, Ollie, an absolutely desperate situation in those two countries. The number of people affected here. What are some of the WHO's biggest concerns, though, in the quake-affected regions right now?
Yeah, one of the immediate concerns, Dawn, from the WHO has been the weather and the difficulty that that has been causing in the rescue efforts so far. You mentioned those staggering numbers, the WHO thinking that as many as 23 million people in total could be affected, but the staggering numbers don't end there. The WHO also talking about 5 million vulnerable people possibly being affected, included in that around 350,000 older people in the region, 1.4 million children as well. One WHO official is reported as saying that it is believed by the organisation that as many as 20,000 people may well have died in this disaster, and that therefore the death toll could well continue to rise significantly. The WHO talking about the chances of finding survivors diminishing every minute, every hour that passes. That's how it was described earlier by the WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus. And he's been speaking, though, about the concern not just being about the numbers.
Numbers do not tell us about the perilous situation that many families now face, having lost everything, forced to sleep outside in the middle of winter. It's now a race against time.
That description as a race against time, as I say, has been hampered by the weather. The UK, for example, set out yesterday an early package of rescue support that it was sending in terms of personnel, but also equipment too, at the request of Turkey. That was supposed to get there last night, Turkish time, but it was delayed because of the weather. And so many agencies have been finding similar delays as a result of the weather and the difficulties with some of the infrastructure on the ground as well. So that race against time, as it's described by the WHO, is in a very difficult spot.
Ollie, getting help to those affected in Syria, it's particularly complex. Why is the disaster zone there so dire?
Partly because it's effectively a war zone, much of that region. We've been hearing that from UK officials today as well. That's part of the reason that the UK says that it rolled out initially that package of support to Turkey, because it's just easier to get support to Turkey in a way that it's much more complicated because of the conflict zone that is across some of the affected areas when it comes to the north of Syria. And we've been hearing similar from the WHO as well. Adelheid Marshang, who's the senior emergencies officer, describes it as a crisis on top of multiple crises in the affected region. She talks about the needs in Syria being the highest because of what she describes as nearly 12 years of protracted complex crisis. She talks about humanitarian funding has been on the decline for that region because of conflict too. So very much complicated by the issue of war, but also therefore complicated by the lack of the ability of a central government in Syria to get the response to some of the affected areas that you might otherwise be able to see. And that's why the WHO is also saying that it believes that Turkey is much more capable in that regard of getting assistance to its affected citizens. So yes, that's one of the reasons that the WHO particularly worried about what is unfolding in Syria right now. And some of that is also to do with a lack of information coming from some of those areas.
Ollie, thank you for that update. Ollie Barrett there in London.